Doctors couldn't save the female CEO until a poor single dad did something shocking. 500 of the world's finest physicians. Millions of dollars. Every treatment failed. Every specialist baffled. In the most exclusive suite at St. Catherine's Medical Center, New York, one of the most powerful women in America was dying, her body turning against itself in ways modern science couldn't explain. And then, at 3 o'clock in the morning, a janitor knocked on her door, holding a small glass jar. The fluorescent lights of the executive ward buzzed softly as David Cole stood outside Suite 12, his heart pounding. His calloused hands, the kind shaped by years of pushing mops and hauling cleaning gear, trembled around the tiny jar. Inside lay Jessica Donovan, CEO of Novogene Biotech, a woman whose decisions could move stock markets. And tonight, she was moments from death, and he, a 40-year-old night shift janitor, was about to walk in with something that could save her life or get him arrested. "What am I doing?" he whispered. Then he remembered seeing her through that half-open door a week ago, sitting alone at 3 a.m., bandaged hands shaking as she tried to type. He'd heard her sobbing quietly, that deep, helpless kind of crying that comes when hope runs out. And he'd heard her whisper to herself, "I built my company to help people. Now I can't even help myself." David raised his hand and knocked. The door opened almost instantly. Janet Brooks, Jessica's assistant, a sharp-faced woman in her 50s with steel gray hair pulled into a tight bun, glared at him. "What are you doing here?" "This is a restricted room." David's throat went dry. "I need to speak with Miss Donovan." "About what?" "The floors?" she snapped. "It's 3 in the morning. Get out before I call security." A weak voice drifted from inside. "Janet, it's okay. Let him speak." David stepped forward, holding the jar. "Ma'am, I know how this looks, but—" "Oh, I'm sure you do." Janet cut in, hand moving to her phone. "A janitor showing up at 3 a.m. with a mystery jar? Completely inappropriate. Please." David's voice strengthened. "I've watched you suffer for weeks. I've seen every doctor fail. I have something that might help." Janet let out a sharp laugh. "You, a janitor? You think you've solved what the best medical minds couldn't? Jessica, he's probably here to sell snake oil." "It's not snake oil." David's jaw tightened. "It's a remedy that saved my daughter's life when doctors gave up on her." Janet sneered. "Every scammer has a story." She raised her phone. "I'm calling security. Show me." Both turned toward the bed. "Jessica, you can't be serious," Janet protested. "He cleans floors, for God's sake. You've had Nobel Prize winners at your bedside." "Show me what you brought," Jessica said, stronger now. David lifted the jar. A golden liquid caught the light. "It's a mixture of calendula, colloidal oatmeal, raw honey, and lavender oil," he said quietly. "The key is how it's prepared, and where the ingredients come from." "Honey and oatmeal?" Janet snorted. "Ridiculous. Your Harvard immunologist used cutting-edge biologics, not grandma's recipes." "The biologics nearly killed me," Jessica said flatly. Janet stiffened. "That was real medicine, Jessica." David met her glare. "You're right. I didn't go to college. I clean your floors. But I also held my wife's hand while she died from something doctors couldn't fix, and I watched a miracle when my daughter healed after they said she never would." Janet turned to Jessica. "He's manipulating you. Please let me call security." "Janet." Jessica's tone was calm but cutting. "Look at his eyes." Janet hesitated. "They're shaking hands, Jessica." "No, not from fear," Jessica said softly. "From hope." The room fell silent. Jessica took a breath. "Why did you really come here, Mr. Cole?" "Because I couldn't sleep anymore," David said, "knowing I might have something that could help, and doing nothing about it." He swallowed. "Because every night when I clean these floors, I hear you cry when you think no one's listening. And I know what helpless feels like, ma'am. I wouldn't wish that on anyone." 5 years earlier, David Cole was a different man, a construction worker by day, a dreamer by night, building a future with his pregnant wife, Grace. They'd picked baby names, painted the nursery yellow, laughed about whose eyes their daughter would get. Then Grace went into labor. Complications, bleeding, blood pressure spiking. Organs failing one by one. Doctors tried everything, tests, treatments, specialists. Nothing worked. Her body just gave up. She held baby Lily once, whispered, "Take care of our girl," and was gone. David buried his wife on a Tuesday and started a janitorial job the next Monday. He needed health insurance for his newborn. He needed to keep moving so grief wouldn't swallow him. Back in the hospital room, David asked softly, "How long have you been sick?" 6 weeks, Jessica answered, voice hoarse. It started as a rash. Within days, it covered 60% of my body. The pain's like being set on fire from the inside. 500 consultations, 43 treatments. Everyone either failed or made me worse. Steroids shut down my kidneys. Immunosuppressants caused seizures. Even antihistamines triggered shock, Janet interrupted. We've tried everything. The best minds in the world. David barely heard her. He was remembering baby Lily, 6 months old, screaming through nights of raw, bleeding eczema that no doctor could heal. Until his elderly neighbor, Marin Kowalski, had knocked on his door. My grandmother had a remedy for skin medicine couldn't help, she'd said, pressing a yellowed index card into his hand. You try, he did. Calendula flowers grown in alkaline soil, oatmeal ground to dust, honey from wild bees, lavender oil from mineral-rich fields, mixed at precise temperatures in a specific order under a new moon. Old-world superstition he'd ignored but followed anyway. 3 days later, Lily's skin began to heal. Within a week it was clear. Doctors had no explanation. He kept that index card in his wallet ever since, a reminder that answers sometimes come from unexpected places. Janet's voice snapped him back. Jessica, you're not really considering this. What will the board say? What have they done for me? Jessica whispered. 500 doctors, millions of dollars, and I'm still dying. Tell me about your daughter, Jessica said. And David did. Every detail of Lily's condition, Marin's recipe, the ingredients, and the science behind them. Jessica listened closely, her scientific mind firing despite the pain. The lavender oil, she murmured, grown in mineral-rich soil. That could change the oil's chemical structure. It actually makes sense, Janet was aghast. You're actually considering this? What else is there to consider? Jessica shot back. Another team from Berlin telling me they've never seen anything like this? More steroids that kill me slower. But he's nobody, Janet gestured angrily. And maybe, Jessica said, each word deliberate, that's why he sees what they don't. Sometimes the answer isn't in complexity, it's in simplicity. David set the jar on the bedside table. The instructions are taped to the side. If you decide not to use it, I understand. I just had to try. He turned to leave. Wait. Jessica's voice stopped him. If I use this, will you come back tomorrow night to see if it worked? Yes, ma'am, David said. I'll come back. That night after David left, Janet's voice filled the room in a storm of frustration. This is reckless, Jessica. A janitor with some homemade mix? Do you realize what people will say if this gets out? Jessica's eyes stayed on the small jar glinting under the lamp. In all that noise about appearances and protocols, she said quietly. Did you notice something, Janet? He never asked for money. Never asked me to try it. He just left it here, and said he'd understand if I didn't. Janet paused, her anger deflating. 500 doctors, Jessica whispered. And not one of them looked at me the way he did, like a person, not a problem. The room went still except for the hum of the machines. Jessica reached for the jar. I'll try a small amount. 1 patch of skin. If it burns, we'll know right away, Jessica. Please, Janet pleaded. You don't know what's in that thing. I know what's already killing me, she answered. Jessica dabbed a fingertip into the golden paste and spread it over a bandaged patch on her arm. It felt smooth, almost cool, the scent faintly sweet, lavender and honey. Within minutes, the burning eased just a little, enough for her breath to slow. By morning, the change was undeniable. The angry red skin on her arm had softened to pink, the scales loosening. The pain had dulled for the first time in 6 weeks. Janet stared in disbelief. It could be coincidence. Spontaneous remission. But her voice lacked conviction. That night, David returned, pushing his cleaning cart down the quiet hallway, his stomach tight with dread. When he knocked, Janet opened the door without her usual sharpness. She wants to see you, she said softly, stepping aside. Jessica was sitting up in bed, color returning to her face. She smiled faintly. It worked, David. The pain is less. The skin, it's healing. He exhaled shakily. Thank God. I applied it to a larger area this morning, Jessica continued. Same result. It's like my skin is remembering how to be skin again. Over the next 3 days, her improvement became impossible to deny. The woman the medical world had given up on was recovering. Janet documented everything, applied the ointment herself, and even began researching why it worked. On the 4th night, Janet looked at David and said quietly, "I owe you an apology. I judged you. I almost had you arrested." David shook his head. "You were protecting her." "No," she said. "I was protecting my own pride. Believing wisdom only counts when it comes from someone with the right degree. You reminded me that answers can come from anywhere." As Jessica's condition improved, something else began to change. During his rounds, David would stop by her room, at first for a few minutes, then longer. Their conversations drifted from her recovery to their lives. Jessica told him about building Novagene from nothing, about the pressure of being a woman CEO in a world full of men who doubted her, about how success had come with loneliness. David told her about Grace, the wife he'd lost, and about little Lily, 4 years old now, full of questions about clouds and stars. Janet sometimes watched them talk from the doorway. She saw her boss laugh for the first time in months. She saw David's quiet gentleness and Jessica's walls coming down piece by piece. One evening, as David was leaving, Janet pulled him aside. "She's falling for you, you know." He froze. "We're just talking." "She looks at you differently," Janet said softly. "Don't pretend you don't see it. She's a CEO," David said. "I'm a janitor. Those worlds don't mix. They're just labels," Janet replied. "Maybe it's time both of you stop believing in them." By December, Jessica was discharged. Her skin was flawless again, her energy restored. Doctors had no explanation. The case was already being studied by researchers from multiple hospitals. The night before she left, Jessica asked David to meet her in the hospital garden. It was cold, the trees bare, but she wanted to feel the winter air on her skin, something she hadn't been able to do in months. "You saved my life," she said, breath visible in the chill. "You saved your own life," he answered. "You trusted someone you had every reason not to." "I don't want this to end," she said quietly. "The talks, seeing you every night. I know it's complicated, but I'd like to see you again, outside these walls. If you'd want that." David smiled. "I'd like that very much." Their first date was at a small cafe in Brooklyn. Jessica came in a simple coat, no makeup, no designer heels, just herself. David wore his best shirt, still nervous. They were awkward at first. Then laughter broke through when she teased him about his coffee order. 3 hours passed like minutes. Their second date was at a bookstore. Jessica said she wanted to pick out picture books for Lily. She spent 40 minutes choosing, asking questions about what the little girl liked, watching her kneel in the children's aisle, flipping through stories about brave girls and curious minds. David felt something shift inside him. "Would you want to meet her?" he asked hesitantly. "Lily?" Jessica's answer was instant. "I'd love to." That Saturday, she came to his modest apartment with a stuffed bunny and watercolor paints in a gift bag. Lily peeked out shyly from behind her father's leg. Jessica knelt. "Hi, Lily. Your dad says you like to paint. I brought some colors. Maybe you can teach me how to make clouds." Lily studied her, then smiled. "Okay." That afternoon, David watched as Jessica and his daughter painted on the living room floor, giggling and trading stories. "This is Daddy," Lily said, pointing at a stick figure. "This is me, and this can be you if you want." Jessica's eyes shimmered. "I would love that." Weeks passed. Jessica became part of their little world. She took Lily to the aquarium, to parks, to movie nights. The three of them would sit on the old couch sharing popcorn until Lily fell asleep between them. One night, Lily asked softly, "Daddy, is Jessica going to be my new mommy?" David froze. "Would you want that, sweetheart?" Lily nodded. "She's nice. And she knows about clouds." Later, he told Jessica what Lily had said. Jessica was quiet for a long time before whispering, "I never thought I'd have this. A family. I spent my whole life helping people on a big scale, and I forgot what it felt like to be helped as a person." She invited them to her home that weekend, a mansion in an upscale New York suburb. When they drove through the gates, Lily gasped, "You live in a castle." Jessica laughed. "It's too big for just me. Houses like this need laughter. And messy art projects." David's mother came to visit a few days later. She watched Jessica with her granddaughter, saw the warmth between them. Later, she pulled David aside. "She looks at you the way Grace did," she said softly. "Stop waiting for it to disappear. Start living it." 6 months after that first knock at 3 a.m., David and Jessica were married in the same hospital garden where everything began. A small ceremony, close friends, hospital staff, Janet as maid of honor, Lily as flower girl clutching her bunny. Jessica's skin glowed in the sunlight as she walked down the path toward him. David's eyes filled with tears. Their vows were simple. "You saw me when I was invisible," Jessica said. "You helped me when I had nothing to give back. You taught me that strength isn't about control, it's about caring, even when it cost you everything." David's voice shook. "You taught me that love doesn't care about titles or money. It only sees hearts. And yours is the most beautiful I've ever known." Lily shouted, "Kiss her, Daddy." And everyone laughed as David did just that. Janet raised her glass for a toast. 6 months ago, I almost had this man thrown out. I thought wisdom only came from people with degrees. I was wrong. Wisdom can come from anyone brave enough to care. David gave Jessica her life back, and Jessica gave David and Lily a family. Later that evening, Jessica turned to David and said, "Do you remember what you told me that first night? You said you couldn't sleep knowing you might have something that could help." "That courage changed everything," David smiled. "I'm still just a janitor." "No," Jessica said softly. "You're the man who didn't let the world tell him what he was worth. You're the father who never gave up, and now you're my husband." Their life together was something neither of them had imagined. Jessica continued running Novagene, but differently now. More human, more heart. She funded research for rare diseases that others ignored. David went back to school at night, chasing the education he'd missed, with Jessica studying beside him at the kitchen table after Lily went to bed. Once a month, he returned to St. Catherine's to volunteer with the janitorial staff, a reminder that dignity isn't about what you do, but how you do it. Lily thrived growing up surrounded by love. She had a mother who showed up for every school play, and a father who taught her that real strength is kindness. The story of David Cole and Jessica Donovan spread beyond New York, a tale not just of medicine, but of faith, love, and courage. A reminder that miracles don't always come in labs or luxury. Sometimes, they come in a janitor's hands in a small glass jar, because sometimes, the people the world overlooks are the very ones sent to save it. From that day forward, their lives began to settle into something beautiful, quiet, steady, and real. Jessica and David built a rhythm that felt both new and familiar, as if their hearts had been waiting years to finally meet in the middle. Jessica still ran Novagene, but the company's focus had changed. She poured funding into research for conditions that big pharmaceutical firms ignored. "We make medicine for people, not profit," she often said in interviews, always glancing at David in the crowd when she did. At home, David juggled classes and fatherhood, often sitting up late at the kitchen table with a textbook open, Jessica across from him reviewing clinical reports. Sometimes they'd both stop working, share a look, and just smile. They didn't need words to know what that moment meant. Once a month, David returned to St. Catherine's Medical Center, not as the janitor he once was, but as a volunteer who refused to forget where he came from. He'd still push a mop, still help clean the floors, because to him it wasn't about status. It was gratitude. The same hallways where he once carried that tiny jar now felt sacred. Lily grew fast. She started kindergarten, came home with glitter on her hands and stories about how Mommy Jessica had the best hugs. She'd fall asleep in David's lap most nights, her little head resting on a stack of coloring books. Jessica was there for everything: school plays, science fairs, every skinned knee and bedtime story. She wasn't just part of their family now, she was their heartbeat. One evening, as the three of them sat on the couch watching a storm roll past their living room window, Jessica leaned her head against David's shoulder. The lightning flashed across her healed skin and she whispered, "You know what I realized?" "What's that?" he asked, brushing her hair back gently. "I spent my whole life trying to cure the world," she said. "But the real cure was learning how to love it again." David smiled. "You did both." She looked up at him. "No, we did." From that moment on, their story became something larger than them. It was shared in hospitals, classrooms, and podcasts. how a janitor with a heart full of faith saved a woman science had written off. But for David and Jessica, it was never about the headlines. It was about the quiet moments. Morning coffee before sunrise, Lily's laughter echoing through their home. The simple peace that comes when you stop running from pain and start building from it. Years later, Novagene Biotech unveiled a new foundation, the GRACE Initiative, named after David's late wife. Its mission: to fund research for incurable diseases and support families facing medical crises with compassion, not bureaucracy. At the dedication ceremony, Jessica stood beside David, her hand in his. "We built this out of love," she said to the crowd. "Out of the belief that miracles don't belong to a chosen few, they belong to those who care enough to try." When the applause faded, David looked at her and said quietly, "Grace would have been proud." Jessica squeezed his hand. "She is. I can feel it." That night, after everyone had gone home, David walked through the quiet halls of the hospital where it all began. He stopped outside Suite 12, the same door where he'd once stood shaking, holding a jar and a hope he could barely explain. He whispered a silent thank you to Grace, to Marin, to the stranger who had believed him, and to the life that had grown out of that one impossible night. Because sometimes the smallest act of courage changes everything. Sometimes the person the world overlooks turns out to be the one holding the miracle. And sometimes love finds you when you least expect it, when your hands are still rough from work, your heart still healing, and your faith barely holding on. David Cole had gone to save a life that night. But in the end, that night had saved his too. Years passed, but the memory of that night, the quiet knock at 3 a.m., never faded. It lived in David's mind like a movie he could replay frame by frame. Every time he passed the hospital at night, he would glance toward the window of Suite 12 and feel that same heartbeat of destiny that had changed everything. Life moved forward gently but purposefully. Jessica's leadership transformed Novagene Biotech into something no one in the industry had seen before, a company driven by compassion rather than competition. She built clinics in small towns, funded free patient programs, and hired scientists who believed medicine should heal people before profits. "Innovation without humanity is failure," she said in every interview, and people believed her because they could see the truth in her story. David stayed humble. Even with reporters trying to interview him about the miracle janitor, he avoided the spotlight. When asked about it, he'd just smile and say, "I didn't save her. I just cared enough to try." His education paid off. He finished his degree and took a position at Novagene as a community outreach director, helping low-income families access treatment. He'd walk into meetings in a simple shirt and still carry his old keychain from St. Catherine's. Jessica loved that about him. Lily grew into a bright, curious little girl, always asking questions about how things worked. She'd sit at the dining table with a stack of storybooks and paintbrushes, still fascinated by clouds. "Do you think Mommy Jessica's company makes magic?" she asked one night. David smiled. "Not magic, sweetheart. Just hope that works." On weekends, their home filled with laughter. Jessica would bake, Lily would paint, and David would fix whatever needed fixing. Though Jessica often joked that he still couldn't fix his habit of worrying about everyone else. Sometimes, they'd visit the hospital garden where they'd married. The flowers bloomed brighter there, or maybe it just felt that way because of what the place meant to them. Lily would chase butterflies while David and Jessica sat on the bench where their story had begun. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't opened that door?" she asked once. David nodded slowly. "All the time." He looked at her with the same quiet awe he'd felt that first night. "But maybe some doors are meant to open no matter how afraid we are to knock," she smiled softly. "You still keep that recipe card?" He pulled his wallet from his back pocket and showed her the yellowed paper, edges worn, handwriting faded. "Every day," he said. "It's my reminder that miracles don't always look like miracles at first." As the years rolled on, Jessica's health never faltered again. Her story inspired countless others, patients who refused to give up, families who dared to hope. Hospitals began studying natural compounds the same way they studied pharmaceuticals. Science had caught up with faith. When Lily turned 10, Jessica published a book called The Hands That Heal, sharing her story, not as a CEO or a scientist, but as a woman who'd been saved by kindness. The dedication on the first page read, "For David and Lily, my reasons for believing that love is the greatest medicine." At the book's launch, people from all over came to hear her speak. When she finished, the crowd rose in applause. David stood off to the side, holding Lily's hand, smiling through tears. After the crowd dispersed, Jessica walked over to him, resting her head on his shoulder. "You know, they call it my miracle," she said quietly. He smiled. "It was your courage that made it happen." "No," she whispered. "It was your faith." He kissed her forehead gently. "Then maybe it was both." That night, as they tucked Lily into bed, she looked up sleepily and asked, "Daddy, do you think miracles ever stop?" David exchanged a glance with Jessica. "No, sweetheart," he said softly. "They just change form." Lily yawned and smiled. "Good, because I want to make one too." Jessica brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead. "You already are," she said. Outside, the city lights shimmered across the skyline, the same city that had once held a dying woman and a janitor too afraid to knock. Now it held a family built from faith, courage, and love that refused to quit. Sometimes miracles aren't loud. They don't come with trumpets or headlines. They start in silence, with one act of compassion, one person who chooses to care when everyone else walks away. And for David Cole and Jessica Donovan, that one choice turned a moment into a lifetime. A jar of hope into a legacy, a story that would remind the world forever that miracles still happen, often in the hands of those we least expect. Years later, their story had become something of a legend, not just in medical circles, but among ordinary people who'd lost faith and found it again through them. Documentaries were made. University lectures quoted Jessica's words about compassion, and in every version there was always that same small, quiet moment. A janitor at a hospital door, holding a glass jar at 3 a.m. David never got used to hearing his name in those stories. He always said the same thing. It wasn't about me. It was about doing the right thing when no one else could see a reason to. Jessica's company, Novagene, had grown into one of the most respected biotech firms in the country, but she never lost her humility. Her office still had the same wooden jar sitting on a shelf behind her desk, the original one cleaned and sealed. When reporters asked why she kept it, she'd smile and say, "That's what hope looks like." David continued his work quietly, heading Novagene's Human Impact Foundation. He helped families who couldn't afford treatment, arranged partnerships between hospitals and local communities, and made sure no one felt as helpless as he once had. Every now and then, he'd take Lily with him to St. Catherine's Medical Center. She loved running through the hallways, waving at the nurses who still remembered the night her dad changed everything. They'd stop outside Suite 12 and she'd whisper, "This is where the miracle started, right?" David would nod. "Right here." As she grew older, Lily developed her mother's curiosity and her father's heart. By the time she was 15, she was already talking about studying medicine, not to become rich, but to help people who've been forgotten. Jessica often said she saw herself in Lily, but David knew better. Their daughter wasn't a copy of either of them. She was proof of what love could create when it healed instead of hurt. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Jessica surprised David by taking him back to the hospital garden where they had been married. The staff had strung fairy lights through the trees and Lily had baked a slightly lopsided cake herself. "It's not perfect," she said, handing it to her parents. David smiled. "Neither were we. That's what made it work." They laughed. The same kind of laughter that had started between hospital walls and carried them through a decade of life. Later that night, after Lily went to bed, David and Jessica sat outside on the porch, the city glowing in the distance. "Do you ever think about how strange it all was?" she asked quietly. "That night, you standing there holding that little jar." "All the time," he said. "But sometimes I think life has a way of finding the people it needs." She turned to him. "What do you think it needed from us?" He thought for a long moment. Maybe it needed to prove that miracles aren't about power or money. They're about heart. Jessica leaned her head against his shoulder. "Then I guess we did our part." A gentle silence fell between them, filled only by the hum of the city. Fireflies blinked in the dark and the soft summer breeze carried the faint scent of lavender. In the distance, a siren wailed and faded, a reminder that life kept moving, that somewhere out there another person was crying in a hospital room, waiting for hope to knock on their door. David squeezed Jessica's hand. "If there's ever someone else who needs it," he said softly, "I still have the recipe." She smiled, eyes glistening. "Then we'll make more jars," and they did. Over the years, David and Jessica quietly sent hundreds of small jars to hospitals around the world, each one labeled only with the word faith. Not all of them cured diseases, but every single one carried something more powerful than medicine, the reminder that someone cared. Their story became a legacy, not of science, not of status, but of compassion. And if you visit St. Catherine's Medical Center today, there's a small plaque outside Suite 12. It reads, "In this room, a miracle was born, not from science alone, but from love, courage, and the hands of an ordinary man who refused to walk away." People still leave flowers there, sometimes even a small glass jar filled with honey and lavender glistening in the light, because some stories don't end. They echo, softly, endlessly, reminding the world that healing begins when one person decides to care. And if you listen closely, you can almost hear it. The quiet knock at a hospital door sometime after midnight, the sound of hope arriving,